And with me is former Foreign Secretary Mr. Shyam Saran. Thank you so much, sir, for speaking with us. Sir, I'd like to begin this conversation with your views on India-China, since you were part of the committee that was deliberating with the Chinese on the boundary issue during your years in the Foreign Service. I'd like your opinion on if you think that a thaw in India-China ties is likely in the near future, given that we're about to enter the third year of the standoff, and it's almost 3 years since the Galwan incident. Do you believe a thaw is likely in the near future, and if yes, how do you think that might come across?
So, I don't think that the relations are yet in a freeze because the communications between the two governments continues. Our foreign ministers have been meeting. And also with regard to the boundary issue itself, as you know, there have been several rounds of negotiations between the two sides, both containing military personnel as well as diplomats. So a negotiating process is in place. Now, obviously, we have insisted that unless we can go back to status quo ante, it is difficult to bring about a full normalization of relations or taking them back to where we were before Galwan happened. But this is something which, the process is something that we are invested in. And much will depend upon how, the international situation, the geopolitical context changes. I will never say as a diplomat that, relations are written in stone, that they will not change. So many changes have taken place in the past, and I do not think that we should preclude the possibility that both countries will see it in their interest going forward with so many multiple crises that we are facing, so many multiple challenges which we are facing, that they will also see a certain merit in coming together again.
So you've written extensively about how China is viewed in India and how India is viewed in China. You've also spoken in the past on multiple occasions about the need for more and more young Indians to learn more about the Chinese economy, about Chinese history, Chinese culture. Do you have any word of advice for young Indians who want to study more about China on how they might
repeat what I have said, that even though India and China are neighbors, they are in a real sense strangers to each other, because there has been very little engagement between the two countries, certainly in the last few hundred years. And therefore, there is a very great need, particularly since China is going to be important for India, not only today, but going forward in the future. It is imperative that not only a few diplomats, not only a few scholars, but people in general should know what China is all about. And in dealing with China, it is not enough to really focus, for example, on foreign policy, to focus only on security policy. We need to understand the larger cultural context, the larger historical context within which China behaves in a certain way. If you want to know why is China behaving in a certain way, unless you have some familiarity with its very ancient culture, with its history, why does China think in the manner that it does, it is very difficult even to do a good job in terms of foreign policy or security policy. And I would say the same thing for China, that China has very little familiarity with India. What is India all about? How do Indian people think? How are they influenced by their own history, by their own culture? So there is a gap of understanding between the two countries, both at the governmental level, but more importantly at the peoples-to-people level. So I would certainly say that for young people in India, this can be a very exciting field for intellectual exploration. This is something which is very worthwhile to do. Also because I also believe that whatever be the state of relations between the two countries, this is a fascinating country. This is a fascinating civilization and culture. So it is very exciting to learn about what this culture is all about, what its history is. So yes, yeah, young people should do that.
So I'd like to pivot now to one of the two ongoing wars, particularly the war in Ukraine. We've been tracking how the war has more or less entered a phase of a stalemate, as one might call it. In your opinion, is there an end game in sight to the war in Ukraine? And I have a follow-up question on that in the context of Russia. Do you believe, as someone who spent so many years with the Foreign Service and you've met with diplomats and citizens from around the world, do you believe there is a real possibility of authentic democracy to flourish in Russia?
You know, terms like democracy, autocracy, these are very loaded terms. And, different people may interpret them very differently. So I don't think we should get locked into that debate. Are you a democracy or are you not a democracy? I think it is more important to see in terms of what we see today as a Russia-Ukraine conflict, what are the ways in which what is a very, very destructive, debilitating conflict, how can that be brought to an end? Because it is not only Ukraine and Russia which are being impacted. As you can see that there is an impact across the world, whether it's a food crisis or whether it is a fertilizer crisis. This is beginning to impact other countries, including India. Now, I certainly believe that in invading Ukraine, Russia made a very big miscalculation. Now, it is even possible that Russia may win many, many battles on the battlefield. But to my mind, Russia has in a sense lost the war. Why do I say that? Because number one, even if Russia leaves the whole of Ukraine as a kind of a ravaged country, nothing standing at all, how does that count as victory? You are going to be living next to a country which is utterly destroyed and whose people will probably be hostile to you for generations to come. Is that victory? That's one question. Second question is that in terms of the strategic aims which Russia had put forward as an argument for invading Ukraine, one is NATO was coming closer and closer to our borders. This was becoming a great security threat. No, you have ended up by doing exactly the opposite of what you wanted. NATO has actually come much closer to you. Sweden and Finland, which have a history of more than 200 years as neutral nations, they have decided to join NATO. So in terms of that strategic aim, actually you have achieved exactly the opposite. And thirdly, if the idea was how Russia should be able to at least have some degree of influence over what it calls its near neighborhood, whether it is Eastern Europe, whether it is Central Asia, actually the country which is making the most inroads into these spaces is not the West, it is China. How is this something which is actually promoting Russian interests? And so Russia is in danger of becoming a kind of a junior partner of China, which would, I think, for a country which looks at itself as a great power and is a great power, this can be a very uncomfortable position to be in. And certainly from India's point of view, we would certainly like that Russia should be a great power, should have independent positions, and that India-Russia relations are not adversely impacted by what is happening today between Russia and China.